What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. It's week 5 of the NFL season, and I want to discuss some of the marquee matchups that everybody should be paying attention to. We got Steelers Cowboys Sunday night, Joe Burrow versus Lamar. It's a must-win game for the New York Jets going across the pond to take on the Vikings, who are red hot right now, led by MVP frontrunner Sam Darnold. I know that sounds weird to hear, but yes, Sam Darnold has looked like the frontrunner to win Most Valuable Player. And the Buffalo Bills are taking on the Houston Texans in a game that I feel is going to define what both of these teams are going to be moving forward. And could we see the Jacksonville Jaguars get their first win of the season against the Indianapolis Colts? Before we dive into it, do me a favor. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that bell icon if you're new so you can get notified anytime we go live and drop new content. And check us out on all podcasting platforms. We are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. Giving us a 5-star review means a lot to us. It's like donating $1,000 to the channel. So if you support and you want to help us grow, go ahead. Give us a 5-star review, share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances, and give us a follow on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. That's where you can find us on social media. If you got any questions that you would like answered on a future episode, you can send them in the DMs. Instagram at JTSports_, X at JTSports__. Let's dive into it. Sunday Night Football, Steelers versus Cowboys. You got two of the NFL's biggest brands squaring off, and both of these teams right now are really depleted when it comes to their talent up front. The Dallas Cowboys, they got a lot of injuries on their defensive line. You're down DeMarcus Lawrence and Michael Parsons. The Steelers are down several starters on the offensive line, but this game favors the Steelers for several reasons. For one, Justin Fields is coming off the best performance that he's had so far, and he's playing some of the best football of his career high in completion percentage, and also he's taking care of the football, although he had a couple of fumbles against the Indianapolis Colts last week due to some botched snaps. But with how well Justin Fields played in the fourth quarter of that game against Indy, I know that the comeback fell short, but he erupted for 3 touchdowns in the fourth. And he has accounted for every single one of the Steelers' touchdowns this year. And this is a game where I could see him exploding once again against a Dallas defense that has struggled against the run. They're banged up with injuries. The Steelers are a team that offensively, they haven't really done much. But when you're going up against a defense that has the amount of injuries that the Cowboys do, Justin Fields' running ability could be a big advantage for Pittsburgh getting the win. And the thing that kind of irritates me the most about the Steelers' offense this year has been that they don't trust Justin Fields that much. Last week against Indianapolis, they had no choice but to trust him because they were down so much, and you saw how well he played. And Arthur Smith, the Steelers' offensive coordinator, he needs to open up the playbook more and rely more on Justin Fields' athletic ability, because he is a quarterback that is so dynamic with the ball that you can scheme your run game around him. And we haven't really seen Arthur Smith call a lot of design quarterback runs, read options. We need to see more of Justin Fields running the football on design quarterback runs to take advantage of a Dallas Cowboys defense that has struggled against the run all season long. You saw what the Ravens did when Lamar and Derrick Henry came into town a few weeks ago. I can see the Steelers having a similar performance offensively if they can just open up the damn playbook for Justin Fields. And defensively for the Steelers, last week was the worst game that you're probably going to play all season long on that side of the football. You gave up 27 points to a Colts offense that got led for most of that game by old man Joe Flacco. I can't see them repeating that same performance against Dallas because Dallas is a pass-heavy team. They're one-dimensional offensively. They are one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to running the football. They got 3 running backs that they like to rotate in and out of the game. And this votes well for a Steelers defense that is heavily dependent on their pass rush. That's the strength of this unit. When they can pin their ears back and really just focus on getting after the QB, that's when this defense plays their best football. They struggled against the run last week. Jonathan Taylor broke off a couple of big runs, but I don't expect to see the run game being effective that much for Dallas against the Steelers defense that is really stout up front. And we know that Dallas, with how good they are throwing the football, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, you're going to need to get a big game out of this Steelers pass rush, which I expect to see Cam Hayward, TJ Watt making their presence felt. And I didn't really hear TJ Watt's name called that much against Indianapolis. That's something that's very uncommon when you watch the Steelers play. And normally when TJ Watt ends up having a quiet game, it isn't really voting well for the Steelers. So you need TJ Watt to have a major impact. Cam Hayward as well. This is a pass rush that's more than capable of being able to make life difficult for Dak Prescott. And the Cowboys offensive line, it hasn't been good, but it hasn't been terrible neither. It's been pretty average. And they've kind of been a little bit down in comparison to previous years, because when you think of the Cowboys, you always think of a team that always has very good offensive line play. So I love the Steelers to win this game for the fact that you got a run defense in Dallas that's struggling, and you got a quarterback in Justin Fields that could really take over this game with his rushing ability. He also has shown the ability to be a more than capable passer. He has a career-high 70% completion percentage, and he has a really good relationship with George Pickens. They've connected on a lot of plays downfield. So if you can get Justin Fields going, you use his legs as part of that run game, the Steelers offense could really explode this game. So I like the Pittsburgh Steelers to win. 24-17 is my final score prediction. We got the Bengals taking on the Ravens. Joe Burrow versus Lamar. I'm really excited for this game because we haven't really seen neither one of these quarterbacks square off for a full game in a very long time. It seems like anytime one guy's healthy, the other one gets injured. And we all remember when Joe Burrow injured his elbow on that Thursday night game last year against Baltimore. This is a Bengals team that has their back against the wall. They're trying to make it to the playoffs. They're 1-3. They got their first win of the season last week against the Panthers, but this is a must-win game for them. And you pretty much can say that the playoffs has already begun for the Bengals because you really can't afford to lose any more games. And with how easy your schedule is going to be the next couple of weeks, if you can win this game, there's a strong chance that by the time we enter the start of the December, November, with you winning this game and being able to take advantage of inferior opponents coming up, this could be the game that if you win, it turns around your season completely. And for the Ravens, it looks like they're starting to hit their stride. They're figuring out who they are offensively. The first 2 weeks of the season, it was rough. The offensive line was struggling. But now Derrick Henry has really started to get acclimated in his Baltimore system. We've seen him have 2 straight weeks when he's had big-time performances, accounting for over 200 yards last week against the Bills in the blowout. He scored what should have been 3 touchdowns, but he choked away the third one. And Lamar Jackson is once again playing MVP caliber football. But what concerns me about both of these two teams is their defense. The Ravens defense had their best game of the season last week against the Buffalo Bills. But you were going up against a Buffalo Bills team that they kind of are a little bit, inept offensively in terms of they aren't playing their best football right now because you got a lot of new faces at receiver. And it's going to take a while for Josh Allen and company to really get going. But when you go up against a team in Cincinnati, they can really take advantage of the holes that the Ravens have on defense, which I believe is their secondary. Marlon Humphrey isn't really playing that well, and I don't really think the Ravens secondary has played as good as what they can. And you're going up against a Bengals squad that right now, their offense is not the problem. Joe Burrow is playing the best football of his career. He's hot. He's been accurate, getting the ball out fast. You got T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. You got another good wide receiver in the slot that got number 80. I can't pronounce his name. Like, the Bengals offense also can run the football now, and they've gotten some really good offensive line play this season. So this is probably one of the most potent offenses in the NFL, and I'm really concerned about how the Ravens defense is going to hold up in this game, because playing against a Bills team where you didn't have to worry about any true number one receivers on the outside, you were able to play a lot of man-to-man coverage. Are you going to want to risk playing a lot of man when you got to guard up against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, one of the best receiver duos in the league? And I can't say the Bengals defense is any better than Baltimore's. Baltimore's defense has definitely played better than Cincinnati, because even though Baltimore's secondary, I don't think has played up to par, their pass rush has been pretty good this year. Meanwhile, for Cincinnati, your defense is just in a complete disarray. And for a defensive coordinator that gets as much praise as what Lou Anarumo receives, it's really shocking how much they've underperformed on that side of football. Their secondary isn't good. Cam Taylor-Britt talks a lot of trash, can't really back it up. You know, you got some inconsistent play on the back end as well. The Bengals, not only is their secondary struggling, but they really can't generate a consistent pass rush outside of having Trey Hendrickson. So expect this to be a high-scoring game where both of these teams probably score anywhere between the high 30s, maybe in the 30s somewhere. Because it's like, with how good both of these offenses have looked, I really don't see a lot of stops in this game defensively. I can see this being a game that comes down to whichever offense gets the ball last. But I love Baltimore in this spot because they are the hotter team right now. They are the better overall team, because I really can't trust Cincinnati's defense to get a stop in this game. I really can't. You know, their run defense ain't that great. You can't stop the pass. It's like, what your defense can do is pretty much nothing. You know, and if they win this game, it's going to be because Lou Anarumo and this defense, they played their best game of the season. And with how well Derrick Henry and this offense have been looking as far as what they've been able to do running the football, it's going to be really tough to see Cincinnati pulling this one out unless their offense can just score in every damn possession. Like, this is going to be one of those seasons, I believe, where the Cincinnati Bengals, where if they want to make it to the postseason, every game they play is going to be a shootout. They're going to have to outscore pretty much everybody they play, which is possible because they do have the offensive firepower, which makes them capable enough to do that. But it's just, you know, it's really hard when you put this much pressure on your offense, pretty much asking them to be completely flawless to win games. And that's why I'm rolling with Baltimore to win. I believe that their defense can get more key stops than what Cincinnati's going to get. And that's why I'm taking the Ravens. 34-31 is going to be my score prediction in this one. The New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings are going across the pond to London. This is a must-win game for New York. You were supposed to beat the Broncos last week. You would have been 3-1 going into one of the more difficult stretches of your schedule. After this game, you got a date with the Buffalo Bills and the Pittsburgh Steelers that follows right after. And for you to be 2-2 right now, if you lose this game and you lose next week, your season could tremendously take a drastic turn for the worse, because this offense, they didn't look good against the Broncos last week. I know the weather wasn't ideal, but the Broncos pass rush really got after Aaron Rodgers. That offensive line was in disarray. Aaron Rodgers looked old. He was struggling to avoid pressure, and he had an off game. And offensively, the Jets still are struggling to click because they still are trying to work on their chemistry. And you can obviously tell that by some of the throws that Aaron Rodgers missed to some of those receivers. You had a good amount of drops as well. And the Jets haven't been able to run the football that well this year, which is surprising because they've been pretty good running the football in years past. And if you can't get that run game going and you're one-dimensional against a Minnesota Vikings defense that's the most aggressive unit in the league, with Brian Flores being a defensive coordinator, like, Aaron Rodgers may end up leaving out of this game, having to do nothing but sit in the ice tub for the following week, man, because with the hits that he was taking against the Broncos, man, they were really disturbing to see, because he was limping after a couple of them, and Brian Flores, he ain't going to make anything better for Aaron Rodgers, man. This is a Vikings defense that is overachieving right now, because the Vikings, they had a good amount of injuries in the secondary that had many of us concerned about how they were going to hold up on this side of the football. But Brian Flores, he's been the best DC in the league this year, and I'm really concerned about Aaron Rodgers in this game. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan, and with how bad they looked against the Broncos defense that is really good, you can only imagine how much their offense could struggle against one of the best coached defenses in the league. And the Jets defensively, this game is going to show us a lot about them on that side of the football, because you haven't gone up against a team this good offensively with a capable quarterback since you saw the 49ers week 1 Monday night, and we saw how ugly that game got. And defensively for the Jets, your pass rush is still lacking a true number one guy that can get after the quarterback. You know, you lose Bryce Huff in free agency, no Hassan Reddick. Like, I'm trying to figure out who's going to step up. We know about Quentin Williams. He's a beast, but who's going to be the other dude that steps up alongside of him? And the Minnesota Vikings got a very good offensive line, and that's been an underrated reason why Sam Darnold has had a lot of success. This is probably the first destination that Sam Darnold has been at where he's had a capable offensive line. Not only does the Minnesota Vikings got a really good offensive line, but they are really explosive offensively. They can kill you in a bunch of different ways, on the ground, through the air with Jay Jettas, Jordan Addison. And I'm excited. Speaking of Jay Jettas, we got him versus Sauce Gardner. Best receiver in the league versus arguably the best cornerback in the league. Who do you guys think comes out on top of that matchup? Because Sauce Gardner, a lot of people like to call him overrated because he gets away with a lot of grabbing and holding, but Justin Jefferson, you know, like, I'm really excited to see how he's going to play against one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Not trying to say he's overrated or anything like that, but anytime you get one of these number one cornerback matchups versus number one wide receiver matchups, they're always must see. And I love Minnesota to win this game just because, like, it seems like right now they started this season hot out the gate. You know, they're not having the same issues that the Jets are having with, you know, trying to figure out the chemistry between the quarterback and the wide receivers. You see Sam Darnold playing the best football of his career. You are a well-coached team. You don't beat yourselves with penalties. You don't turn the football over that much. The Jets are the complete opposite. Like, I don't really like the weird dynamic between Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers that's going on. You got Robert Saleh calling out Aaron Rodgers' cadence, kind of being a little bit indirect about it, and Aaron Rodgers is kind of taking shots at him with it. And I really don't like the whole Aaron Rodgers Saleh feel that's going on. And this team right now, like, they really got to win this game, because if not, I really believe that the mood in that building is going to change. Because when Aaron Rodgers first started for the Jets this season, you could feel the excitement in that building. You could feel, like, the aura that he brought that team, because it's like, damn, we finally got a quarterback. But after that loss against the Denver Broncos, it feels like, you know, the honeymoon phase with the Aaron Rodgers and New York Jets has kind of worn off. Now everybody's starting to show their true colors. And Robert Saleh is probably the worst coach in the NFL right now, not named Doug Peterson, because the defense is his bread and butter. And against the 49ers, they got absolutely torched. And up until this game, you haven't played an offense that's capable of being able to really test out that defense. And we're just going to find out just how well that side of the ball is going to be able to hold up, because they're going to need to have a good game out of that defense, because offensively, it may take a while for the Jets to get going. We know how hard it is to score on this Vikings defense with the aggressiveness that Brian Flores has been sending out opposing quarterbacks. And, with the Jets' issues on the offensive line, it isn't one of those things that, yeah, you struggled last week, they'll figure it out this week. Like, the offensive line is one of those things where it may take them to the middle of the season to really get going on that side, because anytime you got a lot of new faces on the old line, it's not one of those things where you can just stick guys in and they automatically play well. Like, it takes a few games to get the communication right, understanding where the pressure's coming from, to be able to adjust the protections and whatnot. So I think the Jets are still in a figure it out period where they're making a lot of adjustments on the fly. And that's why I like Minnesota to win this game, and the Jets fall to 2-3, and the Vikings keep rolling. Sam Darnold continues his MVP campaign. I don't expect this to be a high-flying game where we see a lot of points being scored. I do think that the Jets defensively will show up, but I trust the Vikings more defensively, and with their coaching staff being really good, I got to give them the win. Probably 24-17 is the score I'm going to go with this game. The Bills versus the Houston Texans is a really huge game that a lot of you need to pay attention to, because this game is going to show a lot about both of these squads and what they're going to be moving forward throughout this season. Because the Buffalo Bills, last week, they got absolutely humiliated by the Baltimore Ravens. And that was the first team that they played all season up to that point that was actually a good team. And now you're going up against the Texans team that they got really high expectations this year. I personally am picking the Houston Texans to win the AFC and make it to the Super Bowl. But the Buffalo Bills, they're good enough to be in that same conversation where we could see them make a Super Bowl run this year, but they need for the receivers to step up. Now, the rumor has been that they've been in on trying to make a trade for Devontae Adams, because last week against the Ravens, they did nothing but play straight man coverage against you. And when you got a defense that plays man-to-man coverage for the entirety of that game mostly, it shows that they don't respect your receivers, because they don't think they can get off the line or create a lot of separation against their DBs. And you're going up against a really well-coached defense by DeMeco Ryans, that's the Texans head coach, and this is one of the better defenses in the league because they got a lot of talent on the D-line. They can get after your quarterback, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, and you got Derek Stingley in the secondary that probably should have a all-pro year, and he probably could end up being a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. Jalen Petrie is a really outstanding safety that doesn't get the credit he deserves. You got a Bills squad right now offensively that you really need Josh Allen in this unit to carry the load for this team, because with all the injuries that the Bills are dealing with on the front seven and in that secondary, you expect for C.J. Stroud to have a big performance with the kind of talent that the Texans have in their wide receiver room. We could see Tank Dell playing this game, and they could get back Joe Mixon as well. And the Texans offense looked really good when they had Joe Mixon in the backfield, because without him, they haven't really been able to get that ground game going, and they kind of have been a little bit overly reliant on the passing game. And Buffalo, you don't want this to become a game where your offense has to do everything because your defense is struggling to get a stop, because this game definitely could go that way. The Texans, with how deep they are at wide receiver and the injuries that the Bills have, it's going to make life really difficult on that defense, especially with them losing Von Miller, who's now has to serve out a suspension that's going to keep him out the next couple of weeks. And that's going to be big because Von Miller, I know a lot of people forgot about the dude. They were writing him off saying he was washed. Well, he's been really good for the Bills this year. He's had a sack in every single game they played in, and it's really unfortunate that they're going to be without him. Now you're going to have to lean on some of the other pass rushers on that side to really be able to get after C.J. Stroud. And this is a Texans offensive line that is playing pretty solid, but with how they struggled against the Minnesota Vikings a few weeks ago, if Sean McDermott gets aggressive, sends a lot of pressure at C.J. Stroud, that could help out the Bills a little bit defensively. But the Bills offense really has to show up this afternoon in this game. Because, you can't have another performance where your offense pretty much is a dud and a no-show like what they were last week against Baltimore. And you know that D'Amico Ryans is going to do a really good job of having this defense well prepared to try to contain Josh Allen. The Ravens did a really good job last week of not allowing Josh Allen to beat them from outside the pocket. Yeah, he had a couple of big throws, one that he made to Khalil Shakir for a eventual touchdown, but they didn't really allow Josh Allen to beat them from outside the pocket. They did a really good job of containing him. When you go up against Josh Allen, you're going to have a few plays that he makes. You know, he's one of the greatest quarterbacks that I've seen in my lifetime. I'm only 22 years old, so don't start talking about Joe Montana and all those other old heads because I weren't alive to see him, all right? Josh Allen, he's a beast. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch, but you really need to get back to playing that brand of football for the Buffalo Bills that helped you get out to that 3-0 start, which was their ability to run the football with James Cook and the other running backs that they have behind them. Because if you can be balanced, keep your defense off the field, give them a lot of time to rest on the sidelines, that could help you in this game. So the team that I'm really leaning towards is Houston. And I'm not really confident about it because I feel like this game really can go either way, but I just like Houston a little bit more because of the injuries that the Bills have on defense. Even though I don't expect for the Texans to drop 40 on them, you know, this could be a game where late, you know, the offense could struggle and Buffalo's defense really needs to get a stop, and they can't get one because they just got worn out with how many drives they were on the field. And I really like what the Texans have at wide receiver. The Buffalo Bills, they haven't really been that great in the secondary, and this is the second game against a really good opponent, and I feel like this loss is going to kind of show us that the Bills might not be the team that we thought they were a few weeks ago, because now that they're playing competition that is pretty much on the same level as them, they're now starting to get a little bit exposed. So I like the Texans. I just think that right now, with all the injuries that the Bills are dealing with, and the fact that their offense still is trying to establish a better chemistry when it comes to the receivers and Josh Allen, because they got a lot of new faces at wide receiver. Khalil Shakir, he is the most experienced wideout that they have, but some of their other receivers, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, they haven't really done much these first couple of weeks into the season. And that's because, like, they're still learning the offense. They're still trying to build that trust with Josh Allen. And I feel like that's why the Texans end up winning this game. Unless the Buffalo Bills can get back to playing complimentary football, you know, I don't see how they can win this one. But I do believe they got a chance. You know, I'm like 60% Houston and 40% Buffalo right now. So that's just how I'm feeling about this game. The Jaguars are still searching for their first win of the season. They are the only team in the NFL right now that doesn't have a win. And you're going up against a Colts team that we don't know what the status is for Anthony Richardson going into this one. Is he going to play? Is he going to be forced to sit out with that hip injury that he suffered against Pittsburgh? And you would think that Jacksonville should be able to win this one, because Indianapolis, they're not really that good. They had a few calls go their way against Pittsburgh, and, you know, defensively, they haven't been good on that side of the football. And Trevor Lawrence last week, he had his best game of the season. He didn't have any interceptions, 2 touchdowns, but he still has been fairly inaccurate. You know, I don't know what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence, but his mechanics are just all off whack. He's like Daffy Duck playing quarterback right now. You know, it's like he's struggling to make the easy throws. He's overthrowing wide open wide receivers. He had Christian Kirk wide open downfield on the touchdown last week against Houston, and he completely sailed it right over his head. But when you're going up against a Colts defense that runs a pretty conservative scheme, Gus Bradley, a lot of people are calling for his job. This is a game that Jacksonville should be able to put together one of their better games that we've seen them play this season. They played pretty well against Houston. It's just that in the fourth quarter, they couldn't get things to go their way. They got stopped on 4th and goal. It's just like, this is a must-win game for Jacksonville. Because if you go 0-5, your season is definitely over. Because we've seen Jacksonville get out to a slow start in the past. In 2022, Trevor Lawrence's second season, Doug Peterson's first year as the head coach, they started out 3-6, I believe, and they ended up getting hot down the stretch, and that's how they ended up getting into the playoffs. So maybe 2024 could go a lot similarly to how 2022 did for the Jaguars, but you got to be able to beat teams that you should be able to beat, and Indianapolis is one of them. Even with Joe Flacco at quarterback, this is a game that favors you because defensively, I like your pass rushers to be able to get after whoever they got at quarterback, especially if Anthony Richardson is in. Because one thing about Anthony Richardson is that he's going to have a few big plays, but he's going to miss a lot of easy throws. You're also going to have the ability to get a couple of turnovers on him as well. And Indianapolis, if you can slow down the run game, if you're Jacksonville, make this a team that has to beat you throwing the football, that votes well for you being able to win this game. So for Jacksonville, it's a really good chance that they could walk out of this one, getting their first win of the year. It just really depends on how good Anthony Richardson can be if he plays, because I still expect to see Joe Flacco out there. And if Joe Flacco plays, this game could be a lot differently than how I expect it to be, because Anthony Richardson, with him being out there, it gives the Jacksonville Jaguars a better chance because he's not consistent throwing the football. He could go 9-22 in this game, and 3 out of 9 of those passes end up being big plays, but the consistency with him isn't there. And what's odd is that you can make the argument that Joe Flacco is the better quarterback of the two, but the Colts are still opting to go with Anthony Richardson because they are dedicating this season solely to him being able to develop. So if he can play, I expect him to be out there, and that gives the Jaguars defense a great chance at being able to come away with some big-time takeovers or turnovers to help out that Jaguars offense that's been struggling. And for Jacksonville, your run game, you got to find a way to get that going, man. The run game kind of had its best outing that we've seen them have up to this point. Tank Bigsby, he kind of looks like he now is starting to become more of the lead back. Travis Etienne, his role kind of seems to be diminishing, even though he should be utilized a little bit more in the passing game. It's like a slot receiver. But Jacksonville, the only way I see them losing this game is if they end up beating themselves. You got some bad clock management in the end, some questionable play calling that we've been accustomed to seeing down here in Duval. But I expect Trevor Lawrence to have a good game, maybe his best game of the season, because this is not a good defense. Indy doesn't have a good secondary. They do got a pretty good defensive line. They got a few injuries that they're dealing with, but they still got a really formidable pass rush. And the Jaguars got one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. So that's pretty much the only advantage that I see the Colts having on defense. Offensively, it's just for the Colts, you can run the football. Jonathan Taylor, he's saying that his ankle sprain isn't really that major. He expects to play, but we'll see. But even if he doesn't, I still do like Trey Sermon and the other running backs that they have. They got a pretty decent offensive line as well. But just with your quarterback position and how lackluster your defense has looked this year, I love Jacksonville to get their first win of the season. Final score, I'm going to go with 27-20 as my score prediction for this game. Give me the Jags. And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed, do me a favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. The links to the pod are down in the description down below. And I will see you guys shortly with another episode of the podcast.